At 23 minutes past 1, on the morning of April the 26th, 1986, the world was seconds away from its worst ever nuclear accident. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union exploded. Five minutes later, a phone call, recorded at the time, was the first alert of a tragedy in the making. By morning, the physical devastation was revealed, but much worse was to come. The disaster at Chernobyl brought death and disease. It brought the very idea of nuclear power into question. And within the Soviet Union, the trauma of Chernobyl was so great that many see it as the first step in the breakup of the communist regime. This film tells the story, minute by minute, second by second, of the 1 hour countdown to tragedy. It's seen through the eyes of the key actors in the drama, the workers who were accidentally led to their deaths, and the innocent bystanders who looked on. Based on documented evidence and eyewitness reports, it has been filmed on location inside the surviving areas of the Chernobyl nuclear power station. The control room at Chernobyl's reactor number 4. It is here that all the key decisions in the coming hour will be taken. The future of the reactor and the world beyond is in the hands of 3 men. At only 26, Leonid Toptunov is senior control engineer. His job is to control the enormous power in the reactor.
17.
Alexander Akimov is the shift foreman, the captain of the ship.
Ну что, все выспались? Поужинали нормально?
But tonight he is outranked.
Начнем, пожалуй.
Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is in charge.
Потом.
Dyatlov is one of the Soviet Union's top nuclear engineers. He's also a hard man, operating in a harsh system. There is a further vital character, the newly commissioned reactor number 4 itself, one of the communist regime's proudest technological achievements. Tonight, the control room is preparing for a safety test on the reactor.
Мощность упала почти до 500 мегаватт.
А что с Ларом?
Я отключаю локальный автоматический регулятор мощности реактора.
But a fateful argument is brewing between the 2 senior engineers and Dyatlov about the level of power at which it is safe to begin the test.
Один включился, но все равно мощность падает.
Продолжайте.
Что происходит? Мы же не должны опускаться ниже нормы 700 мегаватт. Это же небезопасно. Что я ему скажу?
Я ему сам скажу.
Не надо мне ничего говорить. Я все знаю сам. Думать не твоя работа. Здесь я принимаю решение. Делай, что тебе говорят. Это набрал каких-то наглых карасей.
Анатолий Степанович, мы и так
On
уже
this night,
опустились ниже
Chernobyl is
минимальной
harboring two deadly
безопасности
secrets.
700 мегаватт.
The first is a potentially fatal flaw in the reactor's design, which the engineers are unaware of. A flaw that makes it highly unstable when run at low power. The second secret concerns the man in charge. Anatoly Dyatlov's own history is scarred by the very technology he is seeking to dominate. Tonight, Dyatlov and the reactor will face each other in a battle of strength that will destroy them both. 31 minutes past midnight. The argument over the power level at which the safety test on Chernobyl's reactor number 4 can begin grows ever more serious.
Анатолий Степанович, мы и так уже опустились ниже уровня безопасности в 700 мегаватт. Мощность падает очень быстро.
Единственное, что здесь нестабильно, так это работа твоих некомпетентных людей.
Been demanded by Russia's atomic energy authorities and stems from the Cold War fear of being attacked that still grips the Soviet Union. A few years before, the Israeli Air Force bombed an Iraqi nuclear reactor built by the Russians. Since then, Soviet scientists have demanded tests on their reactors to see what would happen if they came under enemy attack and their power supply was knocked out. But Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is deliberately ignoring top-level advice on how the test should be done. The guidelines state that the reactor's power should be between 700 and 1,000 megawatts when the test begins. Dyatlov wants to do the test at only 200 megawatts to preserve the cooling water that stops the reactor overheating. He believes there is little risk.
Unfortunately, that night, there was not a single man in the control room that he saw as his equal. There really wasn't anyone there who was as strong a character or as professionally qualified, whose opinion he would respect.
Реакторы не ошибаются, ошибаются люди. Давайте за работу.
Dyatlov is not in fact an unreasonable man. Rather, he is a creature of the communist system that has raised and promoted him. He was born a fisherman's son in Siberia and ran away from home at the age of 14. He's overcome these unpromising beginnings to rise through the ranks as an engineer. He is a party man who tries to follow the rule book, but he's aware that in the nuclear industry, the rule book and reality often don't match. To get things done, shortcuts and improvisation are sometimes the only answer. Winding the power down has led to it dropping too fast.
Что там у тебя?
Ну, мощность быстро падает.
Ты что натворил, идиот? Что ты наделал? Ты же мощность упустил! У тебя же руки из задницы растут! Да помоги ты ему!
Успокойся, успокойся, не суетись. Начинаем все сначала. Успокойся.
One mile away from Chernobyl is the dormitory town of Pripyat. Everyone who lives here works at the power station. Though they don't know it, all these people's destinies will be dictated by the events unfolding in control room number 4. Among them, soundly asleep, is Nikolai Fomin, the chief engineer of Chernobyl, who left the order for the safety test to be carried out. A few hundred yards away, Natasha Yevchenko is being kept awake by her 2-year-old son, Kirill. From her window, Natasha can see the lights of the nuclear power station where her husband, engineer Sasha Yevchenko, is working a routine night shift. As he passes through the kilometer-long turbine hall, Sasha's thinking not of work, but of the upcoming May Day holidays.
Вот такого сына поймал. Метр 40. Да, не поверила. Говорила, что 120 не килограмм в школе.
Чем-то этот вечер отличался, знаете, не так, как всегда.
There was something about that night, something unusual. For some reason, I got all dressed up. The weather was remarkable, very warm for spring. I went off to work in a terrific mood. But my wife said that all night our son Kirill was crying. She didn't sleep a wink.
Риба дуже маленька сьогодні, знаєш. Що дуже маленька. Каже, може, на вихідні...
Others are also awake. Among them, two fishermen. One, a Chernobyl maintenance man, casting for fish, attracted by the power plant's warm wastewaters. "24 minutes to 1. A new problem disturbs the concentration of the increasingly fraught operators.
Да выключите этот вой!
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторах опасно низкий.
Давай соберись, это твоя работа.
Senior unit control engineer Boris Stolyarchuk controls the flow of water through the reactor. He's all too used to alarms like this.
As for
the water levels in the separator drums, it was always difficult to control them at low power. All the operators knew about it, so I didn't feel afraid. Then,
22 minutes to 1. The reactor has ground to a complete halt. Dyatlov makes a fateful decision.
Ты же уронил реактор! Имбецил ты долбаный! Ну давай, поднимай мощность! Выводи регулирующие стержни! Бегом!
to raise power after 12:30, the shift actually had to pull all the control rods out of the reactor. This was like cocking a gun.
Control rods are the accelerator and the brakes of the nuclear reactor. Below the 50-foot reactor lid are 1,661 uranium-filled fuel rods, which descend into the reactor's core. The splitting of the uranium atoms releases enormous heat from the fuel rods, which turns water into steam. The steam drives the giant turbine, which generates electricity. To control this power, 211 boron control rods are spread throughout the reactor's core. If they're raised, power accelerates. If they're taken out altogether, the engineers lose their ability to apply the brakes. Yet that is exactly what Dyatlov tells his men to do.
Извините, Анатолий Степанович, но разве мы не должны остановить реактор? И так положено по инструкции.
Это верно, Анатолий Степанович. Это абсолютно верно. Если мы извлечем регулирующие стержни, управлять реактором нам после этого становится почти невозможно.
Как же испытания не проводить из-за таких кретинов, как вы? Испытание будет проведено сегодня! А тебе я скажу. Если ты не хочешь или не можешь выполнять приказания, я могу избавить тебя от этой необходимости. Ты меня понял? Да. Пошел вон! Трегуб, прими управление!
Начал. Так, осторожнее.
The men's revolt has failed. Tregub and Akimov power up the reactor.
Отлично. Прекрасно.
Within 5 minutes, they've got power rising again. Dyatlov has what he wants.
Не удалось поднять мощность реактора до 160 мегаватт.
Ладно, передай управление Топтунову. Вперед. Только не уходи и постой с ним рядом.
The control room staff have every reason to fall in line. To be a nuclear engineer is a prestigious and well-paid job. They and their families live in the company town of Pripyat. The shops are well stocked. There's a new school and amusement park.
Nobody wanted to lose the job, because losing the job would mean losing the flat in Pripyat and going elsewhere to probably some ghastly outpost in Siberia. The fear of getting sacked was a reason why they didn't speak out more effectively when they realized that they were doing something that could be very dangerous.
8 minutes to 1. Another alarm.
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторе опасно низкий.
Разберись, там не маленький!
Ну так что, договорились на выходные на рыбалку?
No one outside the control room knows about the argument going on there. For workers like Sasha Yevchenko, it's just another ordinary night.
Да, собственно, дел-то особых и не было.
There were no specific assignments for the shift. I'd already done one shift, and we all thought the reactor had been shut down. I thought the test had been done on the earlier shift.
Мы думали, что уже аппарат остановлен.
Ну давай, хорошо. Давай.
Outside the plant, the night is still. Three minutes past 1. After the failed revolt, the control room is now calm too.
Мы снова вышли на 200 мегаватт.
The men have got the reactor's power to the level Deputy Chief Engineer Dyatlov wants it for the test.
Анатолий Степанович, мы снова вышли на мощность в 200 мегаватт.
Очень хорошо. Начинайте испытания.
Но по регламенту начинать испытания я могу только при мощности в 700 мегаватт. Если вы хотите проводить испытания при уровне мощности в 200 мегаватт, я прошу вас занести это ваше распоряжение в оперативный журнал.
Да будет вам известно, что как заместитель главного инженера я имею полномочия изменить параметры проведения испытаний. И я ими воспользуюсь. Продолжайте испытания.
In the pump room, mechanic Valery Kadanchuk is visited by his friend, foreman Valery Perovichenko. Kadanchuk has less than 20 minutes to live.
Я думал, ты сегодня не на смене. А я специально пораньше из Киева вернулся.
Ну что, продал машину справа?
Ну, по крайней мере, с покупателем договорился.
Хорошо, поздравляю.
Как говорится, прощаю, Москвич 2140, здравствуйте, Жигули.
Отлично.
Я думаю, что, может быть, еще останется и на джинсы. Да ладно.
Ну ладно, будем видеться, пока.
Давай, до встречи.
Next on Perovichenko's rounds is Sasha Yevchenko in the maintenance department. An innocent request will lead them back to the pump room near the reactor's core.
Сань, мне нужно немного зеленой краски. Зачем? Мне надо обновить маркировку на трубопроводе. А пойдем, у меня бутовки еще да? Кстати, Саня вот совершенно не разбирается в рыбалке.
Кстати, так же, как и ты.
На затылке.
The water shortage continues to set off alarms, but still none of these engineers believes a serious accident is possible. For the top man, Nikolai Fomin, it's simply inconceivable.
Fomin had done a correspondence course in nuclear engineering, but he wasn't an expert in the field at all. He had risen mainly because of his standing as the party secretary. Unlike Dyatlov, who was aware that there were dangers in these reactors, Fomin believed everything he'd read. And so when the issue of safety arose, he'd say, well, the chances of an accident are completely remote, about as remote as you being hit by a meteorite.
Even the safety-conscious Alexander Akimov, who does understand the technology, has officially estimated the chances of an accident at Chernobyl as 1 in 10 million per year. But Akimov and his colleagues do not know the reactor as well as they think. They are the victims of years of cover-up and negligence.
рабочими буднями стала для нас и одна из республиканских целевых программ «Энергокомплекс».
From the 1960s, the expansion of nuclear power has been a key target of the communist regime. Nothing has been allowed to get in the way, not even the KGB. These recently released KGB documents show the authorities ignored repeated warnings between 1979 and 86 that Chernobyl had serious design flaws. Chernobyl's director, Viktor Bukhanov, and his senior managers rushed to get reactor number 4 open early, so that they and their party bosses could win substantial bonuses. Safety came second.
Bukhanov, the director of the whole power station complex, was always at his wit's end to meet deadlines to build these reactors. For example, the roof of the reactors was meant to have been built with fireproof materials, but these fireproof materials didn't exist. The roof had to be put on, so he used combustible materials.
Accidents were common and hushed up. The very tests being done on this night should have been carried out before reactor number 4 was even opened. Now, at Chernobyl, all these chickens are coming home to roost. Something deadly serious is happening in the reactor's core that no one in the control room is aware of. The few boron control rods still in the reactor are only partially inserted at the top, so power is building into a hotspot at the bottom of the core where the sensors don't always detect it. The reactor is now an invisible ticking time bomb. Minutes past 1. The growing pressure inside Chernobyl's reactor number 4 is matched by the pressure within the man controlling the night's events, Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov. Dyatlov remains determined to push through the safety test, despite the opposition in the control room. One reason may be power station politics. Dyatlov is in trouble with the local Communist Party for being rude to his workers. His boss, Nikolai Fomin, is due for promotion. A successful test could help Dyatlov get Fomin's job and remove him from the engineers on the shop floor. But Dyatlov also holds a darker, more personal secret. Back in the 1960s, he'd worked in Siberia, installing nuclear reactors into submarines.
There was a nuclear accident. The investigation found that it happened as a result of Dyatlov's actions, though it was not shown to be his fault. Dyatlov was exposed to 200 rem, 3 lifetimes worth of radiation.
Soon after the Siberian accident, Dyatlov's son died of leukemia, the most common disease children get from exposure to radiation. It is said the tragedy changed him, made him more driven, more willful. Tonight, his will is set against the very nuclear power that may have taken his child. 1:17 a.m. Less than 6 minutes to the start of the safety test. Dyatlov is confident.
На 200 мегаваттах расход воды небольшой. Мы сможем повторить испытания, если что.
До сих пор таких испытаний не проводили.
Мы проведем.
But the hotspot continues to build unseen at the bottom of the core.
Еще 2 минуты и все. Шевелитесь, шевелитесь.
Outside the control room, life and gossip carry on as normal.
Не понимаю, что Фомин делает на атомной электростанции. Он же обычно работал на обыкновенных электростанциях.
А, тогда ясно, почему он сказал, что управлять реактором так же просто, как электросамоваром.
Ты комара когда-нибудь видел?
Ну.
Тогда представляешь, какой тонкой струйкой он мочится. Вот такой же толщины должна быть та ниточка, по которой нужно ходить, чтобы преуспеть в партии. Ты думаешь, это у тебя получилось бы? Тогда, наверное, надо оставить эти разговоры. А то сибирские комары загрызут.
Да. Просит сигарету. Жена звонит.
Да? Да, хорошо. Сейчас буду. Держи. Вернусь, докурю. Дятла вызывай их срочно.
Смотри, чтоб дятел не закрыли. А он таки заклюет.
Perevchenko's route to the control room will lead him past the reactor.
Ну, ежели, наконец, все готовы, может, мы начнем испытание?
Запишите все параметры испытания турбогенератора. Мы начинаем.
Нет, Саш, все ты не прав. Детишки, это прекрасно.
Может, для тебя прекрасно, а для меня пока рано. Я пока об этом не думаю.
Зря. А мы вот думаем. Второго уж думаем.
Включить 2 резервных насоса.
Включить 2 резервных насоса.
Резервные насосы включены.
Хорошо. Ну что, Александр Федорович, начнем испытание.
The test will shut off the power to the massive turbine and let it coast. Backup diesel generators will take over, but there's a 40-second gap before they kick in. The question is how effectively the slowing turbine will keep the water pumps going until the diesel generators take over. Without that water, the reactor could boil dry like an immense kettle. But to Dyatlov, who continues to have no idea of the hotspot that has already built up, the risk remains purely theoretical. The power to the turbine is turned off. Over the next minute, a terrifying chain of parallel events will unfold. As the turbine winds down, the pumps push less water through the reactor's core. More and more steam is generated from less and less water. Steam pressure builds at the core's invisible hotspot with every passing second. As the steam pressure rises, it spreads to the pump room. Perevchenko enters the huge reactor hall directly above the reactor's lid to see something never witnessed before. Steam pressure inside the core is lifting the 350 kilo caps to the fuel rods out of their sockets.
запускать АЗ-5! Произошел резкий скачок мощности.
Я включаю систему аварийного снижения мощности.
Pressing the emergency AZ5 button automatically lowers the bore and control rods to reduce power, but it has an unforeseen and fatal effect.
The boron rods were in fact tipped with graphite, and that short moment when they are first inserted into the reactor, the graphite in fact leads to a surge in the power, not a reduction of power.
From when the AZ5 button was pushed until the explosion, the power increased hundreds of times.
Акимов, что там у тебя? Акимов!
Это не у меня, Анатолий Степанович. Что происходит? Это у Столярчука.
Реактивность удваивается каждую секунду.
Это невозможно.
Уровень мощности превысил 530 мегаватт.
Наконечники срывает с крышки реактора. Ребята! Ребята! Люди!
Котик дома. Котик. Интересно. А кто
The disaster is now seconds away. Steam pressure at the reactor's hotspot can't be contained. 50 control and fuel rod shafts are torn apart. Power rockets, turning the whole reactor into a volcanic steam pressure cooker.
Що таке? Стріл? Вуголь такий, вуголь якийсь.
Куда делся свет? Нет,
Что случилось?
пропало питание.
Это
Что?
не
Это у тебя давай опять. Что
Посмотри
происходит?
немедленно.
Куда смотреть?
Акимов, сбегай к Столярчуку.
Какой
Куда энергия
Столярчук?
девалась? Что случилось? Никто не знает.
Почему света? Скорее, 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 посмотрите все.
Посмотрите на пульт.
Что показывают датчики?
После первого взрыва я
After the first explosion, I thought the problem was a hydraulic blast in the deaerators.
хотел побежать,
I wanted to try to switch the setting to compensate, but then the second explosion happened.
но прогремел второй взрыв. Буквально там через
Seconds after the first blast, we heard the second, a massive explosion. I didn't know what it was. We only felt the blast wave. It smashed my door.
То есть у меня в кабинете вышибло двери.
With the 500-ton safety cap blown off and air being sucked in below, the reactor becomes a giant blowtorch, blasting 50 tons of nuclear fuel into the atmosphere, 10 times Hiroshima. 700 tons of radioactive graphite are blown around the plant. Clouds of dust are sucked into the control room, accompanied by a strange smell. Gases released from the core leave a metallic taste, like ozone after a thunderstorm. It is in fact the stench of death. The dust is the cloak of the invisible killer of radiation. The control room operators are far enough away from the reactor's core to survive the explosion, but some will wish they had not. Many will face days, weeks, even years of agony as radiation burns them to death from the inside.
что вот мне особенно бросилось, так сказать.
What struck me was what had happened to my wall. It's cast concrete, a meter thick. I saw it in the corner of my room, bending as if it was made of rubber, like this. It got dark immediately. The lights went out. Steam wrapped around everything. Dust, steam, darkness, and a horrible hissing noise.
А что это? Война, я пойду к себе на пост.
I thought it could be an earthquake or maybe war. The reactor was the last thing on my mind.
Это был мой оператор, Виктор Дегтяренко.
That was my operator, Viktor Dektorenko. I only recognized him by his voice. His face was burnt, all covered in blood. Victor was still in shock. He said to me that he had been near the pumps together with Rusanovsky, the second pump operator, and that he stayed there, and I should help them. When I reached him, he was shivering. You know, when a man is in shock. He just indicated with his hands and said, but what did I find? Ruins, that's all I saw. If he had been there, he would have been buried under the pillars. In place of the ceiling, there was only sky. A sky full of stars. At 3 a.m. I was vomiting violently. It was the first sign of radiation sickness. At 6 o'clock I couldn't even get to the first aid post by myself. They helped me there, put me in an ambulance, and took me to the medical station.
Sasha Yevchenko will survive. Others are dying. The radioactivity pours out of the reactor to be blown across Belarusia towards the heart of Europe. The real nightmare is still to come. By the morning of April the 26th, the KGB was filming the devastated scene of the worst nuclear accident in history. Whoever shot this declassified KGB footage absorbed a massive dose of radiation. The next day, the people of Pripyat were officially told the worst.
возникает необходимость провести временную эвакуацию жителей города в близлежащие населенные пункты Киевской области.
Вечером следующего дня я уже полетел.
The following night I was taken to Moscow by plane. Only 5 people survived from those who were on board. Then my family was evacuated with the entire city.
Были эвакуированы вместе со всем городом.
It would take a full week for all 135,000 people to be evacuated. The radiation count was so high that flashes from it burned straight onto this film. A 30-kilometer zone of exclusion was declared, a zone frozen in time like a modern Pompeii. Over 600,000 Soviet men and women were brought in to contain the radioactivity. They worked in hellish, often chaotic conditions, with extraordinary bravery in order to safeguard the rest of the world. Many of them had no protective clothing whatsoever. Everything they touched burned with radioactivity. The poisonous cloud spread beyond borders, across much of the northern hemisphere. Washed into the earth by the rain, the radioactive dust lives on in plants, animals, and human beings. Within the Soviet Union, in the changing times of a new openness, the political effect was profound.
Все вы знаете, недавно нас постигла беда. Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
I think in both a symbolic and a very real way, Chernobyl was the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. I think in a symbolic way, the sort of meltdown, the explosion, was caused by all the inherent contradictions in the Soviet system, and therefore it's a very good paradigm, if you like, symbol of what was to happen.
Chernobyl's death toll, though horrifying, has turned out to be smaller than many first feared. The scientific consensus is that it will cause some 10,000 cancers in Russia and 25,000 worldwide over a 70-year period. As yet, the only proven rise in disease is in thyroid cancers in children. It is in individual human lives that the cost is most visible. The fishermen spent the night watching the firemen fight the radioactive blaze until they started to feel ill. Within hours, their skin went black, a nuclear tan that foreshadowed their deaths. "30 workers, including fire crew on the site, died from acute radiation poisoning. Valery Kademchuk was vaporized in the explosion while at his post in the pump room. Valery Perevychenko died 6 weeks later of radiation burns, suffered trying to find his friend Kademchuk. Alexander Akimov died 15 days after the explosion from radiation poisoning. As long as he could speak, he said, "I did everything right. I don't understand why it happened." Leonid Toptinov died 3 days after Akimov. He too protested his innocence to the grave, saying he'd done everything he could. The chief engineer of Chernobyl, Nikolai Fomin, was sentenced to 10 years hard labor, but was soon released due to a mental breakdown. He's now said to drift in and out of lucidity. Miraculously, Sasha Yevchenko survived, as did his wife Natasha and their son Kirill. But that night lives on in his memory and in his body.
I had 15 skin graft operations in the first year. The burns didn't show themselves at once. They appeared after I got to the hospital in Moscow. They ripened. When I was in the recovery unit, my skin was all black. When they pulled back the sheets, my skin peeled off like Xerox powder. I have to be careful now. For instance, I can drive a car, but I can't do repairs. I can't touch petrol or oil. The wounds won't heal. The blood won't congeal properly. There are other things, but you get used to them. You just live with it. You have to.
Anatoly Dyatlov received a massive 390 rem of radiation. But even this 5 lifetimes worth of radiation didn't kill him. He lived on till 1995, when he died of a heart attack. Dyatlov served 4 years of his 10-year sentence, and in a remarkable interview given shortly before he died, he argued that in the battle between himself and the reactor, only one side could be blamed.
The reactor shouldn't have been in operation. The real blame lies with the atomic energy authorities. Not having the correct documentation when and where it was needed made the explosion of the reactor inevitable. The reactor marched straight to its doom.
Don't tell me to shut up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wrestling with Conspiracies. So this is something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and I spoke to Andrew beforehand earlier today while at work. This one is more along the lines of facts that have now been proven, but that before they were, it was a lot of conspiracy theories going on about it. See, watching what we just watched, the question I have to start off for both of you is there something that you saw there that you didn't know as far as facts?
Not really. That one, it did. It was missing an important piece there, because that safety test was going to be done earlier that day, about 12 hours before, and they had already lowered the power from 32,000 to 16,000. But they got a call from the Atomic Energy saying that they can't do the test till after midnight because it was at the end of the month, and they didn't want to lose, man hours as far as working goes in the different plants and the factories. So they didn't want to lower the power until after midnight. I don't know why that made a difference, but anyway, by lowering the temperature ahead of time, you had already started feeding the reactor poison, because that the fuel, when melted down, turns into xenon, which is a poison that helped to fuel the reactor. And once they lowered the temperature even more, that just created more of a problem, which you saw in the film.
Yeah, the only reason I don't think they mentioned that is because it was focusing on just the hour before.
Right. Yeah.
I think, and so this video is actually the most informative one that I found.
Yeah.
It had a lot of information going on all at once.
Yeah, it did.
And
Yeah.
it took me a very long time to find it. But that's the reason I went with it, was because it very much went, as y'all saw, minute per minute.
Right.
Yeah,
That's why it was 46 minutes long.
I think changing the time was the biggest mistake, because when you change that time, you put that one guy that was supposed to be in charge of everything at home asleep.
Yeah.
Not only that, but so there's a detailed docu series on Max on Chernobyl. It's 5 episodes long. I recommend y'all go watch it. This there was a shift change at midnight. They didn't know they were going to do a safety test until they got to work, so they didn't have time to prepare.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that one guy said, he thought they'd done it earlier in the day, and he didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the docu series, the one thing I remember happening at the beginning, when everything started to go down, was that they even called extra people in that weren't supposed to be there that day.
Yeah.
So knowing what was going on and knowing the potential risks, they still decided to bring more people in. And for what reason? You know, I saw that a lot of them really weren't that effective after what had happened. So I don't understand what the point of bringing them in was.
This whole thing, it was such a cover up that uh, the the U.S., for example, didn't start to find out until about 3 days later. That's how secretive they were keeping it, because at the time, the Soviet Union was a huge power in the world, and so they had a reputation to maintain. They didn't want to look weak to the West, mainly the U.S. So that's why they hid it from the rest of the world.
Until got to the point where they couldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And until scientists in Stockholm started seeing the radiation cloud, and they actually trace it back to Chernobyl.
And here's the thing. I know that news didn't travel back then as fast as it does now. If something happens across the world, we know within minutes
Yes.
that something is going on.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to justify or anything like that of why they kept it a secret, but 3 days is a very long time for something like that to not come into the news and for the US to know about it.
And they were talking about the May Day celebrations, which that's that's our version of Labor Day. We do that in September,
Yeah.
but mainly the rest of the world does it in May, and they went on, like in Kiev and in Moscow, they went on with parades, and as if nothing had happened. And also the cloud of radiation started drifting northeast towards Moscow. So what the Russians did, and I saw this on a different show, a documentary I saw, was that they actually got B-2 fighters, and they actually performed cloud seeding around the radiation clouds to make it rain over the more rural areas outside of Moscow before it got to the main city.
That's actually pretty smart now that that's a very, I didn't know where that was going as soon as you started talking about it, but it's actually a very smart thing to do. I can't.
Unless you live in the rural cities.
Yeah, unless if you live in the rural
because
cities.
on the day of they had the May Day festival, on the parade, it was sunshiny, and meanwhile down the southwest where they did the seating, you had like torrential rains. And it wasn't just rain; it was acid, radiation rain.
In a way, it's smart, like I said, but I'd rather it come down in like the rural areas,
Yeah,
than in the major cities.
Yeah, that's what they were trying to do.
I mean, it's still a messed up thing to do for the people that live down there.
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever minimalizes the casualties, I guess that's what they were looking at.
Yeah.
So I really can't fault them for it. But yeah, Andrew, any thoughts on what we saw, and did anything stand out as far as something you didn't know? I don't know how much of it you actually knew, but
As far as stuff I didn't know, not really. Except the fact that they, at the very beginning, they said this was filmed in the actual building. What?
Yeah.
There's still radiation
Yeah.
around there. What are they doing filming in the actual place?
See, this is why. Okay. So, kind of staying in the subject, this is why I want to show one of the Kyle Hill videos, because he's actually gone there and he did 3 separate videos of him in the actual site in Pripyat, and did one on like the animals that live there now and how they have been affected by all of this throughout the years.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I sent one to you, and then it kind of branches off into the other ones. I think I sent you the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still radioactive, but
Yes.
the amount of radiation that you get isn't near what it used to be, and it's not gonna turn us into some hideous monster or anything like that. That's why one of my goals in life is to visit, and I'll come back and give all y'all fuckers a hug afterwards. Because it's not that, it's not as dangerous as it seems, and that's the word he is trying to spread by going over there.
Yeah, I know that when they do go, they have to wear those dosimeters, what they call them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they gets over a certain deal, they have to leave
Right.
for a little while, then come back, so you don't get
So
too much.
I mean, unless you go into the reactor itself, which that's why they built the containment building, which they should have fucking done in the first place. That's what we do here in the West. We build containment buildings over nuclear reactors.
He went inside the reactor. But hey, look, man, he's still dollar store Thor. He hasn't lost any hair. He hasn't lost any muscle. He still looks the same. Okay. Also staying within this subject, Fukushima Daiichi, after the tsunami hit,
right, in Japan.
Yes. He's also been there. And they are just as secretive, if not more, than what we saw here, because they lied to them about the radiation levels before they let them go and get near the building. And he said if he knew what the levels were, he wouldn't have gotten off the bus. He would have stayed inside and just let everybody else go. And I don't blame him. That's a video for another day, because there's plenty of his videos that we could go through. But yeah, it's not as radioactive now as it was back then. It is safe.
So the level of radiation in reactor 4, they measured it at 12,000 Röntgen, which is, they said, like maybe like something like 4,000 chest X-rays.
Yeah.
And in fact, they had to get all that graphite off the roof so they could put the containment building around it. They borrowed a lunar rover from Germany, and this is all in the docuseries. A lunar rover from Germany to try and do that. They put it on the roof, got it on the roof. It hardly worked. It broke within seconds of starting to move. They lied to the Germans. They said it was only 2,000 Röntgen. Yeah.
What
There's a cover up right there.
Yeah. What a waste of technology and money that was.
Yeah, and they said that there was a higher powerful like a police robot, but it was in West Germany, so they didn't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to deal with that as well.
But no, because it was in the West and they're in the East, so
yeah. The one thing that stood out to me, and I believe I remember his name correctly, the guy that was in charge of it all,
Dyatlov.
Anatoly.
Yeah, Anatoly Dyatlov.
Here is what caught me off guard when I first watched this video. The fact that he had already been in a submarine where he was working with radioactive materials.
Yeah.
And the fact that he had already received a very sizable...
That I didn't know. I didn't know he had already been through something like this before.
Yeah, that I did not know either. That's why I wanted to bring it up. The fact that he had already received a very sizable exposure to it, and he went through it again, and this motherfucker still lived.
He lived for 9 more years, and he didn't even die from the radiation.
Yeah.
He had a heart attack.
He had a heart attack. That is what stood out to me in this as the only thing I really didn't know. But I don't feel bad for him, because seeing how he acted, and they were portrayed very accurately from what they said.
Yeah.
He was a bit of an asshole.
Yeah, he was. But, and you also got to remember, though, that this is Soviet Union. That, you better watch out, who you cross, because any little thing could probably get you killed.
True.
I mean, even Putin does it today.
Yeah.
He had that guy, that the leader of the Wagner group, he had him killed in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only thing I would say is if something like this were to happen now, the way he acted, they wouldn't let it slide. Like I would think it would have to be treated in a different way, and more people would have probably stood up and not let it happen. I just feel bad for everybody else that passed away because of this, because it's if you really look at it, it's all because of him. If only he would have listened. Yes, you're the senior guy in charge, but these other people were there for a reason, because they also know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe listening. I know it's fucking Russia, and they wouldn't listen for shit because they're how they are down
Yeah, yeah, that they were right, and there's nothing you can do to change their mind.
there. Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people who passed away, I feel bad for, but the one guy that should have passed away didn't until years later.
Yeah. In fact, the guy they said was vaporized. He has they never recovered his body. He's still forever will be in the bottom of the reactor.
Yeah. And there was another one that happened. I can't I've seen so many different videos that I can't remember which one is exactly where. I just remember a lot of details. And the one detail I remember is they weren't necessarily vaporized, but all that was left, the way they described it, was just ooze, just goo. That's what they turned into.
Yeah.
And it was stuck to the ceiling. And whenever it happened, it was actually three guys that were in the room, but they could only account for two because they didn't know that the third one was stuck to the ceiling. And they found him, I think, a day or two later. That's when they finally realized that that's who it was, and they were able to take him out carefully. Because man,
spatula.
No, it was. I'll have to find that video because it's a lot of Kyle Hill stuff. I really watch him a lot. So yeah, we're gonna have to do a different video where I show you guys all of his Chernobyl ones. It's 5 different videos, roughly around an hour 20. So we're gonna have to set some time aside for all of those.
The official death toll from Chernobyl by the Soviet Union, was 31. Even though it's been projected between numbers more like between 4,000 and 93,000, mostly from like cancer death.
Yeah, cancer death. I guess the 31 is talking about
on site
that day or whatever,
or within weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up was so far all we saw in that video were straight facts, but seeing as this is wrestling with conspiracies, I want to ask you guys if y'all have heard any of the conspiracy theories surrounding Chernobyl.
Not as much conspiracy theories. I know there's a lot of supposedly hauntings around Chernobyl.
Because I have a couple. I obviously can't bring up every single one of them because it would be a really long video, but I do have some of them pulled up. So I'm just gonna read you some from this article. And this obviously came more to light ever since the HBO series came out, because that's when they wrote this article.
Yeah.
So here's the first one. The Blackbird of Chernobyl. Often following a disaster, stories emerge about a portent of doom, often in shape of real or imaginary creature. In the district of Ukraine where Chernobyl sits, people tell the story of the Blackbird, a human creature with wings and piercing red eyes. This apparition was alleged to have been seen by workers at the Chernobyl plant on the 26th of April, 1986, the day of the fateful incident. After the event, it was reported that anyone who saw this creature suffered from nightmares and threatening phone calls. Though how a winged creature could dial a phone was not questioned.
Used to speak. Come on.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. Leaving that last bit of information aside, what is this? The Ring? 7 days? I don't think so.
It sounds like this is a Russia's version of Chupacabra.
Yeah.
Well,
Leaving that
yeah.
last bit aside,
It's kind of like the Mothman. People saw that around all kinds of natural disasters.
yeah. Here is what I think people were seeing. And call me crazy, call me whatever you want. Maybe it was the angel of death. People have been said that whenever death is upon them or someone close to them, they do see the angel of death appear. So that's just me. I don't know if that's something you guys believe in, but
The Grim Reaper.
yeah, for many different people to bring that up, that is something that I believe in. Now, to get someone else's side of it, because I'm not much a religious person anymore, so I just want to go to Johnny and see if that's something he believes in or whatever his thoughts on that.
I mean, I believe there's angel of death, that Grim Reaper, all that. I mean, but I think the angel of, well, I know the angel of death, like it just foretells, people passing away.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for. They're there for to take them to the afterlife.
And Andrew is more of thinking along the same lines as I do. So I'm pretty sure is that something you would believe in as well?
Yeah.
Fair enough. So this next one is a little bit more, believe it or not, more far-fetched than the one I just said. But the next one on this list is alien cleanup. Aliens are the bread and butter of myths and conspiracies, from the pyramids to the Roswell crash. And apparently, aliens also had a hand in the Chernobyl cleanup. Rather than being accused of causing the nuclear meltdown as part of a plot to take over the world, urban myths allege that extraterrestrials helped prevent further disaster at Chernobyl, as many expected the catastrophic event to be even worse than it was. An eyewitness named Mikhail Veritsky claimed he saw a fiery ball of light hovering for a few minutes above the exposed reactor on the night of the accident. This ball of light was also allegedly seen 16th of September 1989, when there was a further radiation leak from the unit at Chernobyl, which some imaginative narrators said came from aliens who were containing the radiation.
So I know there's some people that do believe in stuff like this, because I know, like, the times we're living in now, and I've seen videos of there's people that are saying that they've gotten like signals from outer space from aliens, and that these aliens are gonna come to Earth and stop World War III from happening.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff going on right now in Israel and Palestine and in Russia and Ukraine, and they're gonna stop that before it happens.
Well, as far as the aliens above Chernobyl, they wasn't cleaning nothing up. They were just getting power. They're using radiation to power their ships, and they were collecting power. It was like a gas station.
Yeah.
They were filling their tanks.
They were fueling up.
Yes, they were fueling up.
It was like
Hey,
their
it was
quick
free.
trip.
Why not?
Yeah. I do believe in extraterrestrials. I do think that we're not the only ones in this universe, but this is way out of line. I think what they were seeing was just either additional explosions or something like that.
Yeah.
Or a
Something,
radiation
something,
gas
The
yeah,
ball or
radiation
something.
cloud.
yeah, something was definitely in the air, and it wasn't the good type of shit that we normally want to be in the air. But yeah, that one I can't get behind. This next one is a little bit more odd because I can see it happening, but at the same time, I don't really know because I'm not a scientist, so I can't state all the facts. But Chernobyl linked to HIV like condition.
Mm.
The Chernobyl disaster had a huge impact on East and Central Europe, both on the day to day lives of people in the region and on their health. The accident has been linked to increase in thyroid cancer, among other forms of cancers in the area, for example. But it also has been the target for fake medical stories. One of the more malicious of these myths links Chernobyl with an HIV like illness, as the disaster coincided with the height of panic and ignorance surrounding HIV. The story received some traction. Former Alabama Congressman Glenn Browder heard the story while visiting the area, writing for the Huffington Post that the most cruel thing I heard was the emerging rumor of Chernobyl HIV, a whispered warning against romance and friendship which impacted individuals. This damning gossip about some sort of infectious sickness among victims, survivors in that region is baseless, but fearmongers have begun spreading the rumor anyway. Such talk not only hinders social opportunities for individual survivors, discourages businesses from investing in impacted areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Obviously,
That just makes no sense.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get, this was the mid '80s. The AIDS, they only knew about AIDS just a few years before that, so that they didn't know have all the information about it. And back then, AIDS was more of a, or HIV, not AIDS, but HIV was more of a death sentence than it is now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I understand the cancers, but not the HIV.
Yeah. Not necessarily HIV, but obviously there was side effects of being exposed to so much radiation at that time. And if he didn't pass away from it, from what we heard in this video, there was side effects to the children that were birthed by said couples who received such radiation. So definitely not HIV, but I do think I can see where the rumor could be started and where there could be confusion. But yeah, it was definitely not HIV. I'm gonna save this next one for the very end because it's the second to last one, but the one I want to bring up, and this is the one I think you're gonna definitely bring up a certain animal. Animal mutations. In the case of Chernobyl, it was the basis of a video game called Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, set 20 years after the disaster, and in an alternate universe where a second reactor explosion caused life form to mutate into monstrous versions of themselves. In reality, although research showed that animals in the exclusion zone had smaller brains, cataracts, tumors, and sterility, there aren't three-headed dogs or multi-eyed squirrels. Some have in fact branded the Chernobyl exclusion zone a paradise for wildlife, mostly to the absence of people. And I intentionally skipped the first paragraph of this story. What is the animal that comes to mind?
The three-eyed fish from The Simpsons. From The Simpsons.
So the opening paragraph of this is the legit first sentence. Immortalized by the three-eyed fish in The Simpsons, the idea of nuclear radiation causing severe mutations in animals and people has been a long-established idea, although one with little scientific foundation.
Yep, Mr. Burns wouldn't eat the three-eyed fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard the same story that they actually found a three-eyed fish at Fukushima, but I don't know about that.
I don't think that's actually true, but people would spread stories like that.
Yeah. But yeah, wildlife. Yeah, that wildlife has flourished. What they didn't talk about? Well, obviously they were only talking about that night, but the aftermath after they had evacuated the town, they had soldiers going through the entire town, and they were shooting on sight all animals, all the pets.
Yeah.
They didn't give a shit. They were just shooting them, and they buried him in a grave and covered it in concrete.
Here's what I'm gonna say about this. If those are the effects that were being had on humans, I can't imagine what kind of effects it would have had on the animals of Chernobyl. And I would think that there would have been some serious side effects as well. So as messed up as it sounds, maybe that was the humane thing to do.
Yeah, because
these animals couldn't tell you if they're not feeling well or don't have camp. Stuff like that.
Because in the series, they were telling the soldiers, don't let them suffer.
Yeah. And I'm a sucker. I'm like, I can watch the most painful things happen to humans, and it won't faze me one bit. But you hurt an animal, and I am a crying fool.
And you won't watch a whole movie series because of this, which is great.
Yes, I will not, bruh. It
doesn't even show it on the screen. It just knows it happened. John Wick.
Oh
no,
he won't watch it because I love the puppy at the beginning.
I love Keanu Reeves. Come on, he's one of my favorite actors. I love the movie Speed. That's one of my favorite movies ever. But yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't. I know it doesn't happen on screen, but I just, in my mind, it's like I just think they're lying to me, and it does happen on screen. But I don't know. Maybe one day I'll watch it, but I can't guarantee it. I still can't. Like I've said it before on here, I still can't watch Marley and Me. I've only seen it once. Will not watch it again.
Have you seen Coco?
Yes. Hey, that's one of those movies where I'll accept it's good, but
because it's CGI.
Yeah, but I'll only watch it once. Like I can't watch what's its name, Hachi. I don't know if I said that right. Yeah, can't watch that movie, bro, because I know what happens. I know the story. I see the statue that they put up in memory of him, and I'm like, oh.
I guess he's never watched Old Yeller either.
Or what about Cujo?
Cujo was a savage killer, though. You know, there's things, and it's a horror movie. Come on.
Yeah.
And then like
Pet Cemetery.
he killed people, bro.
I know.
But
Pet Cemetery.
yeah, as far as the pet situation goes, I think it was handled correctly because
Yeah.
you don't know what they were gonna feel in the future.
Right.
No, they like dogs hide their pain
Yeah.
well. So yeah, I think they did the right thing there. And for the final topic, because we could go on forever. I have a whole other list that I could go through, but I won't. Government cover up. A disaster of this magnitude often attracts the standard conspiracy theory that it was all orchestrated by the government, in this case, the Soviet government. According to one such theory, the Chernobyl disaster was conducted by the Soviet regime due to the failure of an incredible missile defense radio structure called Duga 3, also known as the Russian woodpecker. You know, sure. Suspected of being wildly over budget, the structure was deemed such an expensive flop that in order to eliminate it, the nearby Chernobyl facility was allowed to go into meltdown. Other government-level conspiracy theories include the that the CIA sabotaged vital equipment at the plant, or that the disaster was a long-term plan by the Russians to turn Europe off building new nuclear plants and be reliant on Russian oil and gas.
That one I can actually believe.
Yeah, that's something I could believe as well.
Because the reactor 4 was open in 83, and this safety test should have been done back then, before, like they said, before it opened. But
Yeah.
they sped up the opening of it just so they can get bonuses. But in the end, even back in 2006, Mikhail Gorbachev admitted that Chernobyl was the ending of the Soviet Union, because it almost financially broke them.
Yeah. And no matter how many years pass, we're never going to know every single detail. But this is the most believable one of the bunch that I just mentioned. Maybe there was something behind the scenes that we did not know of, something else going on in that area, because that probably wasn't the only thing they were working on in that area. So
yeah, because I'm sure they knew about those design flaws when they opened the whole facility.
Yeah. So I personally believe there was other stuff going on, and I wouldn't put it past them for them to, air quotes, cause this disaster to hide something. But I just think it got out of hand. I don't think they expected it to be this serious. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy who sits here and talks about what he thinks. But
so I want to go back to the Simpsons real quick. Okay, y'all remember the episode, the meltdown episode, when the plant melts down, and it's actually Homer's fault that the plant was melting down, but Homer pushed the red button to stop it from happening.
yeah,
That button was well, he didn't know what it was at the time. He just picked it at random because they showed him when he was training what it was, but he wasn't paying attention. He was playing with the Rubik's Cube.
Homer never pays attention.
So that button he hit was the equivalent to the AZ5 button. But the difference was, here in the United States, in the Western Hemisphere, at the time and even now, the tips of our control rods don't have graphite. It's all boron, and boron is what you need to lower the temperature, while graphite accelerates the temperature and the reactivity. That was the main problem at the very end. If there wasn't graphite at the end of the control rods, I'm pretty sure that the accident wouldn't have happened. At the least, the pumps would have exploded, but not the reactor.
Yeah. But this isn't the last time we will speak of this, because there are at least 4 other cases that I know of that I have videos ready to go for future episodes. But
because here in the U.S. we had a few years before Chernobyl, we had 3 Mile Island, which was
that's one of the ones I have ready to go.
Yeah.
And most of the ones that I have coming up, and I'll mention him again, are Kyle Hill videos, because he's been to pretty much every single one of them except for 3 Mile Island. I don't think he's been there yet, but he's still young. He hasn't been affected by anything he's been to yet.
So he's actually like been to doctors and been tested for radiation.
Yeah. He said in one of his videos, he said whenever he got back from every single one of his trips, he's been tested, been given a clean bill of health. Like no type of radiation poisoning or anything like that. So
in the series, after it happened, the one of the main doctors who testified, she started handing out iodine tablets, and that's the way to combat the radiation. So maybe he was doing that.
I believe he did say that they had him take one.
Yeah.
At least at the site of Chernobyl. So
yeah.
Hey, whatever helps, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's going to be one day when we're just going to have to deep dive it on those videos from him.
I thought you were going to say there's going to be a day when we're all going to have to carry around iodine tablets.
Or that. Hey, the way things are right now, we might as well get our hands on some right now, because we never fucking know, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, just to start closing down here, one of the things that he stated as fact in his video is that the amount of level of radiation that you get in Chernobyl right now, it's as if you're standing in front of your microwave. It's as if you are in an airplane. Just the normal levels that are around us is the levels it's the way the levels are over.
Yeah, because when this first happened, they were thinking that site was going to be radioactive for hundreds of years.
Yeah. In his first video, when he goes inside the actual plant, he is wearing a hazmat suit and stuff like that. But in the other videos he did when he returned to the plant and when he was hanging out in Pripyat, just in his normal clothes.
Did he go to the hospital in Pripyat?
I don't think he did go.
Because I know in the hospital, in the basement of the hospital, they have the clothing that the firefighters were wearing that they had to take from them, and that is still very radioactive.
Yeah, he's still like he's timing out his videos. He's not releasing it all at once. And he said that there's many more videos to come. So he might have gone. We just don't know. He might be saving that for later. But, he hasn't grown any additional limbs. He's still just his normal self. So
does he have kids?
Nah, man. He's. I haven't really dived into his personal life like that.
Gotta see if he's sterile.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's something I'm gonna have to ask around or take a look, because I am on his Patreon and I can ask questions and he will answer.
Uh-huh.
So, he's very active like that. He likes to communicate and stuff. So, yeah, you just gave me a whole series of questions that I could ask him. So, might bring this up by next weekend. Who knows? Any closing thoughts or comments on all of this?
Well, I'm just hoping that with the technology we have today and the way we do infrastructure, that we never have something like this happen ever again.
Yeah, I hope so too, because there's still plenty of plants all over the place, and all it takes is for one mistake.
Yeah.
And nuclear still is probably by volume the cheapest and most effective power we can get.
Yeah.
And the type of reactor, by the way, that they had, the RMDK reactor, that served two purposes. It was one of the purposes is to make electricity, to make energy, but also it was used to make atomic bombs. So that's why they called it a ticking time bomb.
Right.
There is one thing I want to show y'all real quick, but I'm going back into my video history on YouTube. Okay, I have pulled it up. I just need to find the exact moment here, because I want y'all. This is what he did recently. So I want y'all to take a quick look. I'm just trying to get it right. Okay. And let me unmute so when I play the video, y'all can hear it.
The relative safety of nuclear waste is both theoretically and practically proven. And if you still don't believe me about that, my tour of the Dresden generating station was my first of a power plant that hadn't exploded.
So he went to an actual plant that's in the United States, where they store their remains of radioactive materials on site, all the waste. They store it in a concrete building, pretty much. And it's not necessarily thin, it's made very thick. But he went up to one of the concrete piles and he kissed it. And he was allowed to do it by security, by all the workers on site that were there for not only their safety, but his safety as well, when he was allowed to take that tour. And that's just one of the things he asked if he could do, is if he could go up and kiss one of the concrete piles. So it can be safe as long as it is stored in the right way.
Yeah.
So as long as we're careful with it, we are fine. But it's when mistakes happen that shit goes down. So,
yeah. Well, look at all the American boats, submarines, and aircraft carriers that are run with nuclear engines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have soldiers on those ships, so it's got to be safe.
Yeah. It's safe to use, but it's when we get negligent and we just take what we have for granted, and we just stop being careful. That's when shit happens. So,
Yes.
And cut costs too.
yeah. Yeah. Cutting costs on shit like that shouldn't happen because it's got to be the utmost safety. But so far, I mean, nothing has happened recently. So let's just hope it stays that way. So, yeah. Another interesting topic, and we could talk about this forever, but there's plenty of conversations we're going to have about it in the future. Because, like I said, I have plenty of videos lined up for us to watch. So, this was just something interesting that us being fans of the HBO series and trying to get Andrew to watch it, this is something we had to talk about. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, and it was interesting, and there's more to come. Hope everybody has a good week. Enjoy Raw tonight, and we will talk to y'all. Oh, actually, watch along.
Yes.
We are doing our watch along on Saturday night.
Full Gear.
For Full Gear. So, hell yeah, come join us for that, and hope everybody enjoys this week in wrestling. Talk to y'all later.
Yeah, see you Saturday.